Good morning, viewers. We're just at about 7:10 a.m. and welcome back to the Tobago Updates morning show, coming to you here live from the Port Mall in Scarborough, Tobago. I'm Julien Skeete, and as we head on into this first interview, we have joining us online Terrence Farrell, a member of the National Advisory Committee on Constitutional Reform, as we speak to the current efforts taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, Julien. Good morning, Tobago.
All right, excellent. As we get the conversation started, we are diving right on in. Within recent times, we saw the appointment of this committee by the government as it relates to making that move regarding constitutional reform. I want you to first indicate to those viewers and listeners, what's the broad mandate of this committee?
Well, the committee was established by the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. It was actually formally done in January. We got going in March, and essentially the intention is to seek the views of the public on constitutional reform, to basically to collate those views, to make them coherent, and to prepare a document that can be used, or that is intended to be used for a constitutional convention, which the government indicated that it would have sometime in the June time frame. So our job is to essentially to solicit the views of the public on constitutional reform. In that regard, just let me point out that we are doing that in a number of different ways. One is that this is the fifth time that the country has embarked on an exercise of this kind since the 1976 Constitution. The 76 Constitution came out as a result of the Wooding Commission, which worked between 1972 and 1974. Many of the Wooding Commission recommendations were not, in fact, implemented in the 1976 Constitution. So we have that. We have the Hayatali Commission, which was in 1988. Then we had the Principles of Fairness Committee, which is a group of business people, actually, who drafted a constitution because they saw the need for reform. And then the Manning administration in 2009, they did a draft constitution, which was done by Ellis Clark. And then under the UNCPP administration, there was the Ramada Committee on Constitutional Reform, which did the same thing that we are doing. They went around the country. So we have all of that information. We have all of those recommendations coming out of all of those efforts. But we are doing our own thing. We are soliciting the views of the public through emails. And we have had to date over 400 email submissions coming into the Secretariat of the Commission. We are doing the town hall meetings. So we have done Point Fortin, Sangre Grande. Last night we went down to Rio Claro. We are coming to Tobago. We will be in Tobago East at Bell Garden on Thursday evening, and we are also doing one on Monday here in Trinidad. So that's Monday of next week in Trinidad. So we are taking all of those, and then in addition to that, we are soliciting the views of we might call them experts on constitutional reform. These would be people like attorneys at law, social scientists, political scientists, and so on, and engaging and trying to get from all of these different methods the views of the public on constitutional reform.
Mr. Farrell, good morning. We're talking about constitutional reform, and we want to know exactly what does that mean for some of us who are not aware of what we mean by this. Why is it important? You spoke so much about so many times before in the past where there were meetings and committees formed to target constitutional reform, and you also mentioned that some of the suggestions were not implemented, and now we're here again, and we're talking about this committee set up for constitutional reform. What exactly are we talking about, and why is it so important, and also to involve the communities within Trinidad and Tobago, the citizens, and updating them on this particular subject?
Well, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It is higher than any other law. So it sets up all of the key organs of the state and distributes power among those organs. So those organs are really the executive, that is to say the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, the President, the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, the judiciary, and the parliament. So those are the three basic organs of the state. In addition to that, you have a number of what we call independent institutions. They are, for example, the service commissions. There are things like the ombudsman. So the Constitution sets up that structure of government and attempts to balance the powers of the state among those three institutions as well as the independent institutions. The second thing that the Constitution does is that it establishes what rights citizens have, and it protects those rights. So the Constitution gives you or tells you what rights you have. We know that we have rights as citizens, as human beings, we have rights. The Constitution identifies what those are and ensures that our rights are protected, so that the state has a responsibility not to infringe the rights of citizens, not to infringe the rights of the public. And if they do, then you have redress through the courts and so on. So the Constitution is an extremely important document. But one of the things that we also point out to people is that, in fact, many of the things that are happening to you in your daily life, many of the irritations that you have, many of the problems that we experience, issues around local government, etc., 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 actually go back to the Constitution, because in many instances it is an indication that the institutions of the Constitution are not working well. Either the executive is not delivering what it is supposed to deliver, or the parliament is not doing what it is supposed to deliver, or the judiciary is not doing what it is supposed to do. So constitutional reform is extremely important. We need to set a step back, reflect on whether these institutions are working well. And we also point out to people, in fact, that the institutions that we operate in Trinidad and Tobago today are, in fact, institutions which were set up in the 1962 Independence Constitution. Because what happened in 1976 is that we made the change from Governor General to President, and we made some other changes. We took away some powers from the Prime Minister and we gave them to the President. But other than that, the basic institutional structure that we're operating in this country with was established in the 1962 Constitution. But I would point out it's even worse than that, because some of these institutions, for example, the service commissions, were in fact set up by the British in the 1950s. We incorporated that into the 1962 Constitution, and we continue to operate the Service Commission structure today in 2024. So we have institutions in our society, in our Constitution, and we are realizing more and more and more, and all these efforts we've had at reform are telling us that we recognize that something is fundamentally wrong with the way in which these institutions are designed, the way in which they are structured, and the way in which they are operating.
I want you to give us an idea, and you spoke to it there, and immediately a two-part question jumped into my head. How is the committee ensuring that, one, we are able to reach that younger grouping of the population as well, so as to ensure that we recognize, just as you mentioned there, whether you recognize it or not, this will impact our way of life? And two, how are we ensuring that those who, just as you mentioned, they've been around long enough to actually know the history to which you have referred without even reading a book, and would probably just say, this is routine. I know this ain't going to yield anything in the long run. How do you, respond to those two groupings as a committee?
Those are two of the biggest problems, Julien, that we have as a committee. First of all, on the question of the young people, it's about how do you reach that group. So, for example, the millennials, that is to say, the people who were born, around the turn of the century, they are between 18 and 25 and so on at this point in time and so on. It is extremely difficult to reach those young people, partly because they are operating in a very different space. So they're not on traditional media, they don't listen to radio, they don't watch television, they are on YouTube, they are on Instagram, and so on and so forth. So it's about trying to reach them wherever they are. The other thing, there's another interesting group of young people that we need to focus on, and that is those who are in between 35 and I would say 45, so they may have young families, for example, they have children who are going to school and so on. So they are affected by what is going on in the society. They see some of the problems because they are concerned about their children and their children's future. And so that group is also very interesting to us in terms of how we reach them. So we are making some efforts to try to reach those, both of those groups through some of the non-traditional channels. So yes, we're doing the usual TV and radio and the newspaper ads and so on, but we are also looking at things like we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are trying to push our message in the various places in which young people are meeting. We are also going to be organizing some focus groups for young people where we bring some young people together to talk about their life experiences and so on, and then to point out to them the importance of that in relation to the Constitution. The second issue that you raise is really about the kind of skepticism and cynicism that people, especially the older people, express in respect of an exercise like this. And what I'm saying is that that skepticism, that cynicism is certainly not unwarranted, because this is the fifth time we are attempting this exercise, and people have a right, I think, to feel, well, we've done this before and nothing has happened. It is incumbent on us as the population, as the citizens, as the people of the country, to indicate to those who currently hold power and therefore who have it in their power to make the changes that the people want. It is incumbent on us to ensure that they do it on this occasion. And it's extremely important, therefore, it's not the committee's work necessarily, but the committee, by articulating what it is the people want, what people are saying, what reforms that they want, whether it's an executive president, whether it's proportional representation, they want changes in the justice system, etc., etc., etc. We will articulate those. We will ensure that the recommendations are coherent, and we will present that, and then it becomes a responsibility of the people of Trinidad and Tobago to impress upon the current leadership, both in government and in opposition, that these are the changes that we would like to see.
You spoke to, just very quickly, I know you spoke to the mechanism of utilizing the email, etc. And I'm sitting here also thinking of some of our average citizens who probably, they're not going to sit down to pen their perspective. But if you have a conversation, they can give you a full minute or two to explain one of the things that they think are fundamentally wrong. Would you say that's also part of the target population that you're looking at hearing from coming out to these town hall meetings?
Oh, absolutely. That's the reason why we're having the town hall meetings, because people can send stuff in by email. As I said, we have over 400 submissions by email. But the town halls are important, partly because you want to get at, maybe some older people are not particularly interested in using email, but also it's important for us to hear people's voices. People want to talk and to expand on some of the suggestions that they have. They want to articulate their concerns and their grievances, and we give them an opportunity to do that in the town hall meetings. So we will be in Tobago on two occasions. We are coming on this Thursday in the Tobago East area in Bell Garden, and then we'll be coming back later in the month in the Tobago West area to talk to the people of Tobago.
Mr. Farrell, you mentioned earlier some of the challenges in terms of meeting or reaching some of the age groups, but you also mentioned just recently also about over 400 emails that you've received, which means that the conversation is ongoing. People are talking, and they're bringing in their concerns. What are some of the issues that people are bringing up? What are some of the topics they're looking for in terms of the changes that they're hoping for to come from this committee that has been established and the work that you're doing?
Well, the range, I mean, we have identified maybe about 50 or 60 different kinds of issues that people are raising. They range from the presidency, people talking about whether you should have an executive president, the president should be elected, directly elected. But they're talking about term limits for the prime minister. They're talking about the power of recall. That is to say, people want the ability that if their parliamentarian is not performing, they want to be able to pull that person back and put somebody else in their place. There's discussion around the justice system and the questions of crime and how you deal with that. There are other issues around electoral reform. People have raised questions around the service commissions and the efficiency of the public service. A whole range of issues are coming out of these submissions. And we are very carefully going through all of them. I mean, we are reading every single one of them that comes into us. And we're trying to make sense of that. And we're also going back, as I said, to the Wooding Commission and the Higher Tally Commission, the Principles of Fairness and the Ellis Clark draft and the Ramadan Committee to look at what people were saying then. And what we see is there's a certain consistency in terms of what people are asking for. Clearly, people want better representation. Clearly, people want a more democratic society. Clearly, people are very concerned about prime ministerial power and how that is organized, or executive power, I should say, and how that is organized in the state. So these are some of the things that are coming through in the submissions that we are getting from the public.
Is it safe to say, or reasonable, based on where you sit and certainly the collective of the committee, that it is only anticipated naturally that you expect to hear feedback as it relates to the Tobago House of Assembly Act, which again is part of our constitution here within the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, for the talks happening here that are anticipated in Tobago?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the questions raised by Tobago are critically important to our consideration, and that's why. So we're making a very special effort to look at the Tobago question. We have the two bills that are before us in Parliament. We know that there's a range of views in respect of what's happening in Tobago. So we are coming to Tobago to hear from Tobagonians themselves what are their thoughts and what's their thinking on that.
One of the other areas I just want to get from you very quickly in terms of before we close, just a reminder to the persons when you're going to be particularly here in Tobago and the duration over which this will take place, because I know the target, as you mentioned, is the government's intention heading in towards looking at that national dialogue that they've indicated is carded for June. Is it that this is the current tenure of the committee and then there will be a determination that happens after? Just kind of walk us through now to June and the anticipation of afterwards.
So our intention is, our committee is going to work towards producing that document by June. Certainly by early June we will have that document. We are not in charge of the constitutional convention. I call it a constitutional convention, or sometimes I call it a constituent assembly. We are not in charge of that. But we will be making our recommendations as to what that looks like, or what that ought to look like. Because there's a way in which these things have to be done if they're going to have legitimacy with the population. So we are going to be making our recommendations on that. And the document that we produce is intended to be used by that convention to allow the convention to come up with the specific recommendations that will then presumably go into a drafting instructions for a new constitution for Trinidad and Tobago. So that's the process essentially that we are seeing.
All right, and we have a quick question coming in online. Is there any Tobagonian on that committee representing the interests of Tobago? I got to ask the viewers questions. You want to tell us about the composition of your committee? I know that you are not responsible for the composition, but who are the members of the committee?
Well, it's a relatively small committee. It's actually only 8 of us, but Ray Sandy is on the committee. He's representing Tobago on the committee. The chairman of the committee is Barry Sinanan, SC, who is a former Speaker of the House. Nizam Mohammed, who is also a former Speaker of the House. Jackie Sampson Miguel is a former Clerk of the House of Representatives. So there are people who understand Parliament and so on extremely well. Helen Drayton, who is a former independent senator. Hemant Narayan Singh, who is an accountant, and we have Winston Rudder, who is the current chairman of the Public Service Commission, who is on the committee, and myself.
Excellent. Yeah. And your humble servant.
and your humble servant.
All right.
All right. Well, we just want to say thank you so much for coming this morning and, giving us that measure of enlightenment as to what is happening with the formation of the committee, and the fact that you've already engaged in conversations and persons are bringing out their issues, and we do hope that we can get some sort of implementation, because as you said, it's the 5th time that we're trying this, and we do hope that we get some measure of success this time around, because of course we all have concerns and we all want to see some measure of change. If even we could get
Indeed.
one or two implemented,
Yes.
you know, it will say something
Yes.
to the fact that we live in a democratic society. So we're hoping that we
Precisely.
can get it done, implemented, and in quick time. By the end of June,
Precisely.
I'm wishing you and the committee, the team, and all the members of the communities within Trinidad and Tobago, we just want to encourage you to come out, to air your views, to, you know, to contribute to the conversation, because the changes that are implemented, if they are, will impact our quality and standard of life. So thank you so much,
Precisely.
Mr. Farrell,
Precisely.
for coming this
You're
morning
very
and sharing
welcome.
that
You're very
information with
welcome.
us. We do wish you and the committee the very best, and we look forward to seeing you in Tobago. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you very much indeed, viewers, certainly bringing us that perspective there, and a reminder, coming to Tobago East on Tuesday, and later on in the month they will also be in Tobago West. At this point, we prepare to head on out to a break, and we want to remind you that this is your opportunity to share the life, share the life, share the life.